Hello everyone, my name is Araceli Delgadillo, and today I will present my food and culture fact sheet presentation on Mexican cuisine. So I have three learning objectives for this presentation. The first is to learn about traditional foods and dishes in Mexican cuisine. The next objective is to learn about traditional eating patterns in Mexico. And the last objective is to learn about traditional health beliefs in Mexico. So in Mexican cuisine, there is a blend of Spaniard and indigenous influences, and in Mexican dishes, it is very common to find complex carbohydrates. Some of those complex carbohydrates that are actually staples of the Mexican cuisine are tortillas, beans, rice, and bread. Meats like beef, pork, chicken, and fish are very traditional to Mexican cuisine. And some of the most common fruits and vegetables that are consumed are tomatoes, squash, sweet potato, avocado, mango, pineapple, and papaya. Next, we will talk about traditional dishes. And I do want to say that in different regions of Mexico, they have dishes that are specific to those regions. Now, they're not exclusive to those regions, but they are originated from that particular region. So first, we're going to talk about the northern region of Mexico. And in the northern region of Mexico, they are very well known for their traditional dishes that are called machaca, cabrito, and arrachera. And these are basically grilled meats. Your choice of meat, and it's cooked in a chili sauce. On the bottom left-hand portion of the slide, you'll see a picture of what machaca looks like. In the area of Oaxaca, they are very well known for their mole, which is a sauce dish, which is a very famous traditional dish of the Oaxaca region. And what's interesting about this dish is that there's actually 7 types of mole or sauces. One of them is mole negro, which is a black sauce, amarillo, which is yellow, coloradito, which is little red, manchamanteles, which translates to tablecloth stained, chichilo, which translates to a smoky stew, rojo, red, and verde, green. In the middle part of the slide, you'll notice that there is some chicken with a black colored sauce. That's actually the mole negro. In the Yucatan Peninsula, they are very well known for a traditional dish that's called cochinita pibil, and this is meat that's wrapped in banana leaves, and then it's cooked in a pit oven. And again, with this dish, you can choose the meat that you want. On the bottom right-hand portion of the slide, that is what cochinita pibil looks like. We continue with traditional dishes, and in the region of Mexico City, some of their traditional dishes are tacos, tortas, which are sandwiches, carnitas, which is pork, and birria, which can be either beef or goat that's cooked in a chili sauce. On the bottom left-hand side of the slide, that is what birria looks like. In the western region of Mexico, tamales, which are corn dough that is wrapped and cooked in corn husk, is very popular. And I think tamales, they're very well known here in the United States. Tamales can include a protein. They can be just the corn dough that has been cooked, or you can include cheese in them. Still continuing with the western region of Mexico, pozole, which is a soup with hominy and pork, is traditional to this area. Menudo, which is another soup that is traditional to this area, but this soup is made out of beef stomach. In the top right-hand corner of the slide, you'll see a picture of what menudo looks like. And lastly, in the area of Veracruz, they use a lot of seafood for their dishes, and one of their most traditional and most popular dishes is called Huchinango a la Veracruzana, which is a fish dish. And you can see a picture of what that dish looks like on the lower right-hand portion of the slide. Next, we will talk about meal patterns in the Mexican culture. And in the Mexican culture, usually the meal pattern consists of 3 to 5 meals, although it's more common to consume 3 meals than the 5. If you did do the 5, that would just be kind of like some snacks in between some of the more traditional, the three meals. And we're going to go ahead and talk about the most common meal pattern, which, like I said, was the three meals. And the first meal, which is breakfast, is actually called in Mexico desayuno. And this meal usually consists of some sort of sweet bread and coffee, so very light. Almuerzo, which is lunch, is usually the heaviest meal of the day, and you will find foods like tortillas, eggs, meats, and beans being part of this meal. And la cena or dinner is usually leftovers from lunch or leftovers from the night before. It's usually something very light. It is the lightest meal of the day. And my family, my parents are from Mexico, and here in the United States, we actually follow the three-meal eating pattern, and it's pretty accurate. Usually, our dinner is very light. Usually the heavier meal for us tends to be lunch. And in the Mexican culture, the majority of the meals are served family style. And again, even here now, our family in the United States, we still serve our meals family style. Next, we're going to talk about some traditional health beliefs in the Mexican culture. And in the Mexican culture, folk medicine is still very common. And curanderos, which are healers, and santeros, which are healers through spirits, are the individuals that you would go see in folk medicine to make you feel better. Curanderos and santeros are very similar in that they use a lot of the similar items to make you feel better. So things like massages, herbs, baths with mixtures of herbs, ointments, and incense are very commonly used by the curanderos and the santeros. And my family, obviously, we practice Western medicine here in the United States, but we do practice some folk medicine. There is a belief in the Mexican culture that there's a balance between hot and cold in the body, and when there isn't a balance of the cold and hot in the body, this can bring about illnesses, and these are referred to as cold and hot illnesses. Some examples of hot illnesses are indigestion, nausea, vomiting, abdominal cramps, fever, headache, and sore throat. Some examples of some cold illnesses, they are earaches, arthritis, stomach cramps, and chest colds. And the belief is that you correct these illnesses by consuming foods and herbs of opposite qualities. So for example, if you have a fever, they're not going to give you a hot tea. They're going to give you something cold because let's say a cold tea. The cold tea will balance the fever, right? So it's creating a balance. There's also a belief in the Mexican culture that there are supernatural powers that have the ability to cause illnesses. And an example of this is called an example of one of these supernatural powers that can bring about illnesses, the evil eye. And the evil eye is often attributed to illnesses in babies and young children. And the belief behind it is that someone with a strong eye looks at a child and doesn't touch them. And because they didn't touch them, they can bring about illness to the child. And things like sleepiness, general malaise, and possibly serious illness can happen to that child because of the evil eye. So babies and young children in the Mexican culture wear a bracelet that has a charm made out of onyx, and on the top right hand portion of the slide you'll see a picture of what that bracelet looks like. And this is something else that my family also believes in. My sister's actually pregnant right now, and we have actually already purchased one of those charm bracelets for her baby so that the baby can be protected against the evil eye. The two pictures on the bottom portion of the slide, those are a santera and a curandera, and you can see that they are trying to heal the individuals. And in the picture in the left-hand portion of the slide, the curandera is using herbs to bring about health, the restoration of health to that individual. Next, we will talk about current food practices in Mexico and for Mexicans that have immigrated to the United States. Like we said, a food practice in Mexico is following the 3 to 5 meal pattern. I don't feel that that has changed for Mexicans that have immigrated to the United States. Like I said, my family practices the 3 meal pattern, but I also have family members and we know friends that follow the 5 meal pattern. So I don't think that that has changed too much. In Mexico, a food practice is that home cooked meals are the best, and prepackaged and fast food meals are frowned upon. And that has slightly changed here in the United States as Mexicans have immigrated. Obviously, home cooked meals are preferred, but because of the convenience of prepackaged and fast food meals, they are becoming more prominent for Mexicans in the United States. Fresh fruits and vegetables are not purchased as often by low-income families, so that's a food practice in Mexico. There's a very big economic gap in Mexico, and so usually families who are not who are low socioeconomic status, they usually don't purchase a lot of fruits and vegetables. That has changed here in the United States because even though a family may be of low socioeconomic status, they still have access to fruits and vegetables through different programs, for example, like WIC, the Women, Infant, and Children program, the use of SNAP benefits that allows them to purchase, fruits and vegetables. So that has changed a little bit. A food practice that has changed for Mexicans that have immigrated into the United States is that it seems that they are consuming, although they have access to the fruits and vegetables, they're consuming less of them. And they're also consuming less beans, rice, and tortillas. And these are actually staples of the of Mexican cuisine, and they're consuming less of them because, again, some of these prepackaged foods and fast foods are really becoming very popular for Mexicans in the United States. And this leads us to our last point on this slide is that there is an overconsumption of convenience foods like potato chips, pizza, sweet baked goods, and fast foods for Mexicans in the United States, whereas in Mexico, not that these foods aren't consumed, but they're not consumed as much as they are by Mexicans that have now immigrated to the United States. So what is my perspective as a future professional in nutrition with regards to Mexican cuisine? What are some concerns that might arise from food selection? So in Mexico, there's a very high prevalence of obesity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and malnutrition. So I feel that modifications to traditional dishes that are high in sodium, fat, and sugar are very important. It's not realistic to tell people that they can't eat their traditional dishes. That's not feasible. But as a nutrition professional, I can offer modifications to those dishes so that they can still be enjoyed, but they can be a little bit healthier. I also think that there needs to be an increase in client knowledge of healthier foods. In Mexico, again, there's a very big income gap. And so usually the individuals that are a little bit more affluent, they tend to have more knowledge of healthier foods, whereas other individuals who are of lower socioeconomic status, they don't have that knowledge base of healthier foods. So I think it's important, again, to increase client knowledge. I think it's important to encourage the consumption of low-fat cheeses and leaner meats. As you can see, meat is very prominent in many of the Mexican traditional dishes, and some of those meats aren't necessarily the leanest. There's a lot of beef, a lot of pork consumption, so maybe encouraging the consumption of leaner meats. In a lot of Mexican dishes, there is cheese that is included, and it's always Mexican cheese. It's, for example, like the queso fresco, which is a type of Mexican cheese. These cheeses are very high in fat, so encouraging consumption of lower fat cheeses. Encouraging decreased consumption of soft drinks and pre-sweetened drinks. In the Mexican culture, it is very common, when you have visitors to offer them a soda because a soda shows that you have a little bit more money. You don't typically offer water because water is free. I mean, you can get it from the tap. And so in the Mexican culture, you show your visitors that you are wanting to give them the best that you have by offering them a soft drink. And so then there's a big consumption of soft drinks in the Mexican culture, as well as pre-sweetened drinks. And what I'm referring to when I talk about pre-sweetened drinks, I'm talking about aguas frescas, or fruits that drinks that are made out of fruits. And fruits have sugar, but then on top of that, added sugars added. So just encouraging a decreased consumption of some of these drinks. Some cultural components to consider when counseling a patient from Mexico. In the Mexican culture, family is the single most important social unit. Everything in the Mexican culture revolves around family. There is some gender differentiation in the Mexican culture. The father is the leader of the house, and I see that to be true for my family. We don't live in Mexico, we live in the United States, but that still holds true here. The father is the leader of the house. A lot of the important decisions are made by the father. The mother runs the household and cooks, cleans, prepares most of the meals. And again, that's not to say that all Mexican families follow this, but it is very prominent. And again, in my household, that holds to be true. My mother runs a household. She prepares most of the meals. Religious beliefs are very important. About 88% of Mexicans are Catholic, and so the church plays a major role in daily life, and especially in the time of illness. I know that for my family, when someone is sick, the priest from our church is called over and comes to our house or to the family member's house and prays over the individual to try to bring about healing. So religion is very important. A lot of health decisions are made based on religious beliefs. So I think that this is something that's very important to consider if you're ever counseling a patient from Mexico. And it's one thing that I do want to add is that in the Mexican culture, it's very common to have family members, attend doctor's visits. Not so much in my family, but I know in other families as well. So just being aware of how important the family unit is. And these are my references, and I want to thank you all very much for listening to my presentation. Thank you.